Well, I think that sanctions absolutely are having an impact on Russia. We are having an impact on their ability to procure technology products needed for weapons. We're having an impact on revenue, and we're also having a broader impact on the kind of difficult choices the Russians have to make about how they run their economy. Mr. Putin has been forced to put the Russian economy on a war footing, cannibalizing the productive sectors of the economy and favoring the military. Of course, sanctions on their own are not sufficient, and we have to be realistic about this. There are still more things we can do, particularly on the issue of Russia's continued revenue flow from oil and gas. But I really think it's very important to emphasize that our sanctions are having a distinct impact and are an important part of our assistance to Ukraine.
I agree with everything David just said. A few points. First, it's an illustration of how closely our systems work together that we're both here having this interview with you together, because the US and EU, with very different systems, are both committed to seeing Ukraine win and Russia suffer a strategic failure because of this war. So Russia's separating itself from the most lucrative markets, its long-time commitments, in order to carry out this war. So sanctions are just one tool. They are driving up the prices. By one estimate, the price of electronics is 70-80% higher than it would be without sanctions. The British have estimated that we've cost Russia essentially 1 year's defense budget with the sanctions that have been put in place. The other thing the sanctions do is make it clear that we are preparing our societies for the future, and that's a future where Russia will not have the kind of influence that it has had over the last 20 or 30 years. So seeing Latvia separate from the electricity grid, many European countries stopping the use of Russian gas, all of these things are setting up for the world in the future, which will be a strategic failure for Russia. Yeah, I mean, our view, like that of the European Union and NATO, is that we want Ukraine to win. How exactly it gets to that point, I think, is something President Zelensky has begun talking about with his people. So we believe this war only really will be over when Ukraine has all of its internationally recognized territory back. The question of the right military and political strategy to get there is something that is for the Ukrainians to decide, and we're committed to supporting them as they figure it out.
Yes, I mean, this is the key point. I think we are all fully supportive of the restoration of full Ukrainian territorial integrity. The question is the precise timing and mechanism for that. In the meantime, all the elements of support for Ukraine are hugely important: the military assistance, the macro-financial assistance, and frankly, the sanctions. So I think we have to focus on having the maximum impact with all of these instruments in order to support Ukraine's ultimate objective. I don't think Ukraine is going to lose. I want to be very clear. I think in many respects, and I say this very modestly, Ukraine has already won. They have thwarted Mr. Putin's objective, which was basically to annex the entire country, and they have made that impossible. So this is already a considerable victory, and I think we all understand that what is at stake here, certainly speaking from a European perspective, are the rules of engagement on the European continent in the 21st century. Are we going to have a system of respect of territorial sovereignty, of independence of countries, the rule of law, or are we going to go back to the law of the jungle that we saw in the 20th century? So the stakes here are extremely high for us Europeans, and everyone is in full support of Ukraine in that regard.
I agree with David. Ukraine will win. And I think we're looking at the stakes here, say for China. China provides Russia 90% of the electronics that show up on the battlefield. At the same time, China is trying to say to the European countries, we want to be your major economic partner. But it's creating this huge security threat. And so one element that's important for the US, for Europe and Japan, Korea, and elsewhere, is to say to China, you don't get to have both things. This is a choice for you. So the stakes are high for us, but they're also very high for those supporting Russia, and we'll see what choice they make.